Hi everyone. So, if you're a fan of Doctor Who, you probably know that there have been 14 actors to play the various incarnations of the Doctor. Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, Baker, Davison, Baker, McCoy, McGann, Hurt, Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, Capaldi, Whittaker. However, there have also been a myriad of alternate or secret Doctors that don't quite officially count despite being in official projects. So, without further ado, today I'd like to take a look at the Doctors that never were. Peter Cushing, Doctor Who. So I'm going to try to do these roughly in order, and that means we start out with probably the most well-known of the unofficial Doctors, Peter Cushing. In the earliest days of Doctor Who, the Daleks were arguably a bigger hit than the rest of the show itself. To capitalize on the runaway success of the show's most popular villains, the BBC licensed a production of a series of feature film adaptations of the early Dalek serials. Ultimately, two of these films were produced, Doctor Who and the Daleks, based on The Dead Planet, also known as the Daleks, and Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD in 1966, based on the Dalek Invasion of Earth. The role of Doctor Who in these films was played by iconic British actor Peter Cushing. Notice I say Doctor Who and not the Doctor, because his character in the films was actually called such. That is, he was an ordinary human scientist whose last name was literally Who. Yeah, it was weird, but it was also the 60s. What do you expect? These movies are a weird mixed bag. Visually, they're a big spectacle in full color compared to the relatively small scale black and white TV series that was running at the time. But at the same time, apart from the fun, retro-futuristic aesthetic they have going on, these films are both kinda boring to watch. Maybe I'll do a full-fledged review of these someday. But as for the subject of this video, Peter Cushing himself, he's one of these film's few saving graces. As one would expect for an actor of his caliber, he gives a great performance in these otherwise weak films. It would have been interesting to see him get to play the Doctor in a proper capacity at some point, and his performance here makes me think it would have been a good one. But if his series had been anything like these movies, they probably would have been long forgotten by now. Trevor Martin, the original Fourth Doctor. In 1974, the BBC was going to license a Doctor Who theatrical play titled Doctor Who and the Daleks in the Seven Keys to Doomsday. Try saying that 5 times fast. However, as the play began production, Jon Pertwee, the third Doctor, made the decision to leave the role. In his place, actor Trevor Martin was cast to play a different version of the Fourth Doctor. In the play's narrative, images of the Third Doctor were shown on video screens with the implication that the play's Doctor had freshly regenerated from him. Prior to this, Trevor Martin also had a small role in the actual Doctor Who series as an unnamed Time Lord at the end of the second Doctor's final story, The War Games. Of course, the stage play is long over, and it isn't exactly going to get a revival anytime soon. However, Big Finish Productions, the company that produces a wide range of Doctor Who-related audio dramas, produced an audio adaptation of Seven Keys, including a return from Trevor Martin to play his unofficial Fourth Doctor one more time. Interesting bit of trivia. Terrance Dicks, a veteran Doctor Who writer who wrote the script for Seven Keys, would reuse many of its elements in the Fourth Doctor serial The Brain of Morbius. And speaking of The Brain of Morbius, the Morbius Doctors. Towards the end of The Brain of Morbius, the Doctor and the titular villain are engaged in a mental battle. During this, the viewer is shown a series of images of the Doctor's previous incarnations, followed by 8 previously unseen faces. These faces were quote-unquote played by a handful of Doctor Who's crew members at the time. They are director Christopher Berry, writer Robert Bank Stewart, production unit manager George Galatio, producer Philip Hinchcliffe, director Douglas Camfield, production assistant Graham Harper, script editor Robert Holmes, and production assistant Christopher Baker. Given the context, a lot of people assume that these 8 faces were prior incarnations of the Doctor. Fans and spin-off media alike have tried to subsequently make sense of these faces, including some that I will not mention. However, I feel as though there's a much simpler explanation. I believe that these faces are the previous incarnations of Morbius. These faces appear when the Doctor is locked in a battle of wills with Morbius, and the Doctor's previous incarnations all appear, so why wouldn't Morbius potentially do the same? I get that it's fun to speculate about the idea of previous Doctors that we haven't ever seen, but the series itself has stated repeatedly since that the Hartnell incarnation is the Doctor's earliest. Plus the fact that had there been 8 prior incarnations of the Doctor, he would have run out of regenerations after the 4th Doctor. Anyway, it's virtually impossible to assess what the Morbius Doctors might have been like in the role, as they don't exist beyond still photographs, so there's really nothing to critique here. Richard Hurndall, the alternate First Doctor. For the second major Doctor Who anniversary special, The Five Doctors, the goal was to once again bring together all the incarnations of the Doctor in an extravagant celebration of the show's past, much like was done for the Three Doctors 10 years previously. Unfortunately, William Hartnell, who played the First Doctor, passed away in 1975. The decision was made to recast him with another actor. Because of his fair resemblance to Hartnell, the actor chosen for the part was Richard Hurndall. Early drafts of the script for The Five Doctors involved a subplot where the First Doctor in this story was instead an android duplicate as part of a trap for the Doctor, but this was ultimately scrapped before the final version. Sadly, Hurndall himself also passed away very shortly after filming his appearance in Doctor Who. According to an oft-repeated rumor, he died before he was even able to collect his paycheck for the appearance. I've always had something of a general opinion that many people's first impressions of the First Doctor were likely formed by Hurndall's portrayal rather than Hartnell's. Since early Doctor Who wasn't quite as easily seen in years past, Hurndall was probably a lot of people's first exposure to this incarnation. The common interpretation of the First Doctor is that he's a grumpy old curmudgeon, but having rewatched some Hartnell stories recently, I don't think he's much like that at all beyond his earliest episodes. I have to wonder if the Hurndall portrayal is part of what makes this interpretation of the First Doctor so prevalent. David Banks, the understudy Doctor. As the classic series was winding down, the BBC licensed yet another Doctor Who stage production, Doctor Who: The Ultimate Adventure. The show toured the UK from March to August of 1989. For the first leg of the tour, the Doctor was played by Third Doctor actor Jon Pertwee, and for the second leg, the role was portrayed by Sixth Doctor actor Colin Baker. However, for 2 of Jon Pertwee's performances, he had fallen ill and was replaced by understudy David Banks. David Banks is probably most well known to Doctor Who fans for his portrayal of the Cyber Leader throughout the 1980 Cyberman stories, as well as the author of the novel Iceberg. For his 2 performances in The Ultimate Adventure, Banks played a unique incarnation of the Doctor wearing a very contemporary 1980s outfit. Fans sometimes dub this incarnation the Greenpeace Doctor after the Greenpeace t-shirt that he was wearing. As there's not really a recording of the Banks performances, it's hard to say what sort of Doctor he really was. However, for those that wish to experience The Ultimate Adventure today, Big Finish has also made an audio adaptation of this play, featuring Colin Baker reprising the role. I think these Doctor Who stage plays are kinda interesting. Maybe I should do a video on them sometime. Rowan Atkinson and Others, The Curse of Fatal Death Doctors. During Doctor Who's wilderness years, a sketch was produced for the 1999 comic release special that gives a comedic take on Doctor Who, titled The Curse of Fatal Death. This special served as the first television Doctor Who written by future showrunner Stephen Moffat. Primarily starring Rowan Atkinson as the Ninth Doctor, the finale of the sketch features the Doctor repeatedly dying in comedic ways as a series of celebrity guests play the very short-lived incarnations of the Doctor that follow. They are, in order, Richard E. Grant as the 10th Doctor, Jim Broadbent as the 11th, Hugh Grant as the 12th, and Joanna Lumley as the 13th. A blonde woman as the 13th Doctor. Why does that sound familiar? Since the other actors are all in the part so very briefly, it's hard to say what they might have been like in the role for an extended period. But it's interesting that for a primarily comedic actor, Rowan Atkinson manages to take the part of the Doctor and make it his own, while still obviously being the Doctor, even though it is definitely something of a satirical interpretation. This probably stems from Moffat's philosophy regarding the sketch. His goal was to make a normal Doctor Who episode that happens to be funny, rather than a straightforward parody. I can't help but wonder what an extended version of the Atkinson Ninth Doctor might have been like. But speaking of alternate Ninth Doctors... Richard E. Grant, the Shulka Doctor. In 2003, Doctor Who celebrated its 40th anniversary. As part of the celebration, the BBC produced Scream of the Shulka, a Flash animated web series released in 6 weekly installments. Remember how a moment ago I mentioned that Richard E. Grant briefly played one of the short-lived incarnations of the Doctor in Curse of Fatal Death? Well, he's back in Scream of the Shulka, portraying another alternate Ninth Doctor in this single webcast. This was this incarnation's sole outing aside from an online published short story. Fans have dubbed this incarnation the Shulka Doctor. Grant described his incarnation of the Doctor as Sherlock Holmes in space, and I can kind of see where he's coming from with that. In this one appearance, this incarnation had a sort of bold, intellectual personality and didn't suffer fools gladly. While he never reprised the role again, Grant would go on to appear in the revived series of Doctor Who as the Great Intelligence in several episodes opposite Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor. The Unbound Doctors. I've already mentioned Big Finish Productions a few times in this video. They've been producing audio Doctor Who since 1999 and show no signs of stopping anytime soon. One of Big Finish's earlier ranges was something called Doctor Who Unbound, a series that examines Doctor Who what-if scenarios, where they break all the established rules of Doctor Who. Since there are so many of these, I won't go into each one in depth, but here's super quick rundowns on them. Ald Morality features Geoffrey Bayldon as an alternate version of the first Doctor in a timeline where the Doctor never left Gallifrey. This incarnation would appear again in a sequel audio years later titled A Storm of Angels, which poses the question, what if the Doctor changed history? Sympathy for the Devil features David Warner as an alternate third Doctor in a timeline where the Doctor did not become Unit Scientific Advisor. Much like the first Unbound story, this story also got a sequel that featured this Doctor's return. The sequel, titled Masters of War, features a timeline in which the Doctor's intervention in Dalek history in Genesis of the Daleks never occurred. David Collings plays an alternate Doctor in Full Fathom 5, an Unbound story that has a premise that's a bit of a spoiler, so I won't say it in here just in case anybody's sensitive to such. Deadline features Sir Derek Jacobi as a character called Martin Bannister, in a story that blurs the line between the fictional universe of Doctor Who and the reality of its television production. The final Unbound story, Exile, features Arabella Weir as an alternate female third Doctor. This story proves controversial as it depicts the concept of a female incarnation of the Doctor in something of a sarcastic, comedic way. On the whole, the Unbound stories are interesting alternate takes on Doctor Who canon. I'm personally a huge fan of what-if stories, so these really appeal to me. If this is something that it sounds like you would be interested in, I recommend checking them out. David Bradley, yet another alternate First Doctor. As part of the numerous celebrations of the 50th anniversary in 2013, the docudrama An Adventure in Time and Space chronicled the behind-the-scenes origins of Doctor Who in the early 1960s. Starring in this was David Bradley, an accomplished British actor. However, in this appearance, Bradley was playing William Hartnell, the actor, rather than the actual First Doctor. That is, until the 2017 Christmas special, Twice Upon a Time, where we had the surprise return of Bradley in the role as the actual First Doctor. I don't really want to get into it here, but I have some issues with how the narrative of the story characterizes the First Doctor. But that aside, Bradley's performance is very believable, though like Herndl before him, it isn't quite an emulation of the original Hartnell. Bradley has also gone on to reprise the role of the First Doctor alongside his co-stars from An Adventure in Time and Space in a Big Finish series of new First Doctor audio adventures. So that about sums up the Doctors that never were, at least the ones that were in some kind of media where they could be played by an actor. In any case, it's fun to take a look at these glimpses of what might have been. Were there any that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great day.
Wow.